Hello and welcome to another episode of the V8 Supercars Fancast. My name is Kendall. I will be your host as always, and it's endurance season, my friends. The Sandown 500 is done, and the next race is, of course, the mighty Bathurst 1000. But before we move on to Bathurst, before we talk about anything like that, let's have a look at what happened at the last race, the Sandown 500. A good race in general. I always enjoyed the Sandown 500. It's a nice prep for a nice primer for Bathurst. Let's just see how the drivers and their co-drivers will perform. Let's just see how the cars are doing. Let's just see how things will work a bit with enduros. How the cars will perform during enduros, that sort of thing. It's always a different atmosphere. Always a different atmosphere. A different vibe, and it's nice to see the grid effectively double with all the new co-drivers coming in. The Sandown 500 this year was also the retro round, where many of the cars, not all of them, went with a retro-inspired livery. And some of them were absolutely beautiful. The DJR cars in particular looked really good. I liked... Gosh, I can't remember what they are off the top of my head anymore. I liked Rick Kelly's retro car. It just reminded me of when I used to watch Supercars when I was much, much younger. They all looked fantastic. Actually, Lee Holdsworth actually looked really good as well. I liked the pale yellow colour on his car. If you haven't seen, for whatever reason you're listening to this and haven't seen the race, obviously go watch it. But take a look at some of those cars because they are beautiful. A lot of them, but it will make it a lot easier to tell who is who for Bathurst when they go back to their usual colours. Because, boy, I was getting lost. I was getting a bit lost trying to figure out who was who as they were driving through the pack. In particular, I couldn't figure out who Macaulay Jones was driving for a long time. He had a lot of incidents in the race, and I couldn't work out who his main driver was. Turns out it was Percat. So, it took me ages to work out who that was supposed to be. I wish they went with a bit more of a retro livery that sort of matched the current livery a bit more. Like, Tim Blanchard's was very different. He was a bright yellow livery on what is normally a blue car, and Garth Tander's was an extremely obnoxious orange colour. I know it's retro, and I know it's paying homage to his boss, which is fair enough. But I probably would have said this about the car back in the day, but my god, that thing was absolutely glowing. It was so bright. But some of them looked really good. Will Davison's looked really good as well. I like that one. David Reynolds was a good one too. I like Simona's. There were some really good ones in there, which was nice to see. I don't understand why some people didn't have retro liveries. Red Bull didn't do it. Gosh, who else didn't do it? Tickford didn't do it with 3 out of their 4 cars for some reason. I don't I don't understand that either. So God knows what happened then. Caruso didn't do it, even though the rest of the Nissans did. Todd Hazelwood didn't do it, but that's fair enough. They're a small team. Yeah, it's just some of the... Notably, Red Bull didn't do it, and I don't quite know why. I wish... It's not a rule, then, obviously. Which puts... I mean, this is going to sound dumb, but it does put some of the smaller teams that decide to participate at a bit of a disadvantage. Like, Techno, they run one car, and, I mean, famously couldn't get sponsors for years. I think it was, 2015, 2014, where they ran that pure white car with no sponsors because they couldn't get anyone to sponsor them. They went with, I think it was a new livery. I'm not sure if it was a retro. But they're not the only one car team that did that. Like, Tim Blanchard did it. Will Davison did it. And it puts these really small teams at a disadvantage, I suppose, because they've got to spend time painting the new car, negotiating with sponsors to see if they're okay with displaying their logos in different ways, as in the case with Penrite on the side of the Reynolds and Di Pasquale cars. They've got to spend time, especially Erebus did this. They changed all of their team uniforms. They were all different just for this weekend, which is a crazy investment. I know Erebus can probably afford it, but some of the smaller teams can't. And the fact that you can opt out of doing it seems like you're at a disadvantage if you choose to do it. Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just something that I was thinking about while I was watching the race. I do hope they keep the retro round. It is cool. I do wish they would stick to colours that sort of match the ones they already have, though, because it makes calling them or recognizing who's who, especially when it's an endurance race and there's already a bunch of drivers I don't recognize or are not too familiar with driving the cars. To add in new cars as well makes it really confusing. So maybe we should stick the retro round in for one of the sprint races or something. That sort of thing. Maybe the tail and bend can become the retro round as well. I'm not sure. It is a nice way to drum up some support for Sandown. It's a race that's often overlooked compared to Bathurst. Which, you know, to be fair, Bathurst is the bigger race. But Sandown usually delivers. It's an exciting track. It's a little simple. It's mostly just a circle, to be honest. Yeah, it's got a few chicanes and whatnot. But for me, it always brings some exciting incidents. The biggest one I can think of in recent memory was Todd Hazelwood's crash from last year, where he just slams into the wall off the back straight, coming up to that hairpin at the end. And I think that's why Sandown can be an exciting track. There's quite a few places where people will attempt to make a move, and it's just, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong spectacularly. And I think the reason to this is because so many of the tight corners, or so many of the corners that lead up to a tight corner are chicanes. Turns 1, 2, 3, and 4 are a tight series of corners, with turn 4 being the final turn before the back straight. Many people go off the edge of turn 2 and under that tyre barrier off to the left, which you can see many videos of people doing that, not just in supercars, but across all sorts of racing formats at Sandown. And I think the other reason why I like the back straight, or Sandown in particular, is because the back straight ends on this extremely fast series of corners and then a really tight left-hander. And it's absolutely fascinating watching the drivers fly through this series of corners and attempt to pull up for the tight left-hander. Scott McLaughlin in particular, they were running a very skinny wing to try and mitigate the lack of power from their engine compared to the Commodores. And you could, every time he drove over these fast corners, he's throwing the car onto the wheels to the point where the wheels were rubbing on the guard up the top, which was absolutely, you'd see puffs of smoke come out the back of his car every time he threw his car over these curbs. It was absolutely wild. I think that's one of the best parts about Sandown, is watching them fly over these curbs at 150, 200 kilometers an hour before trying to pull up for this corner. And lots of people overshoot it, they overcook it and go off into the sand trap. Jason Bright did that during the race. He wasn't the only one. I think someone did it during Race for the Grid before the actual event themselves. And it was surprising that how many people didn't actually do that. I was expecting more lockups to end in failure. Not that there wasn't a lack of lockups, there was plenty of lockups, but everyone managed to gather it up, really. Not that that's a bad thing. We always want to see people, continue to race, but I was just surprised. Sandown usually is very reliable for that sort of, for incidents. Anyway, but that's enough talking about how much I like Sandown. Let's talk about the results of qualifying. So, if you're not sure, and I can't blame you if you're not sure, because Crompton and Scaife didn't really bother to explain the format for Sandown, and it is confusing if you've never seen it before, so allow me to run it down. So, how qualifying works at Sandown, and it's only at Sandown, they don't do this anywhere else, which really baffles me. But anyway, there's a qualifying session as normal, 20 minutes long, where the order is decided. That's fine, that's as normal. Then, the results for that qualifying session is how they start the first race for the grid, which is only run by the co-drivers, not the main drivers. So the co-drivers line up on the grid in the order that the main drivers qualified in, and they do a 20-lap race around Sandown. The order that they finished this race determines the starting position for the second race for the grid, which is another 20-lap race where only the main drivers race. And then the finishing places for the second race for the grid is the final starting order for the actual race. So there's essentially 3 qualifying sessions in a row where it takes into account the performance of the co-drivers and not just the main drivers, which is a fine idea in theory. In reality, it's really confusing. Yeah, I just mean having a race to determine the starting order of an endurance race is just inviting risky moves and damaged cars. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Obviously, it's the driver's job to make sure that they don't damage their car. But we did see that with extremely chaotic short sprint races there. I think more happened in those 2 20-lap races than actually happened in the entire race. It was crazy. In the first race for the grid with the co-drivers, it actually hailed. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen it hail during a race before. It was amazing. As a result, it started to really pour down one half of the circuit, down the back end of the circuit, and at the front end of the circuit, so around turns 1, 2, 3, 4, no rain. Down turns, I think that's right. Maybe it was the other way around. Oh well, I'm going to stick with this one. Feel free to yell at me. At turns 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's sort of front end of the circuit, no rain. At turns 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, pouring rain, hail. Absolutely crazy. So as a result, half the drivers ducked off into the pits to get their tyres changed to wets. The other half stayed out. And as it turns out, the rain cleared up mostly. And the people who stayed on slicks were the ones that profited in the end. Most notably, of the people who came in, both Paul Dumbrell, Jamie Winkup's co-driver, and Earl Bamber, which is a great name, by the way, Shane Van Gisbergen's co-driver, both of them came in for wets at the same lap, so they double stacked just to change to wets in variable conditions. I was super critical of this at the time. I could not for the life of me work out why they called both of them in at once, but it did occur to me that maybe he just came in of his own accord, and they had to react to that. Yeah, they probably could have told him to stay out, but the rain started when they were around the back end of the circuit anyway, so he might have just ducked in or said, I'm doing it. And the team didn't really get a chance to tell him to stay out. It ended up ruining that race for him, because he finished in 16th, I want to say, without looking at the results. Which... There's a championship battle here as well. I know Sandown's part of the endurances, and we sort of treat the endurance races as a bit of a bubble. But there's also a championship going on, and it's very close between Scotty and Shane, because Alex Premer, McLaughlin's driver, ended up finishing in the top 3, I'm pretty sure. So there was a bit of I imagine there was a few looks passed around the Triple Eight garage after that race. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the results for the Armour All qualifying for the race for the grid, I suppose. So, Jamie Whincup was in first place with a, frankly, mildly ridiculous 107.8. I think that's the fastest lap that's seen around Sandown. I think that car was just absolutely flat out this weekend. If that's not the fastest lap, then Dumbrell did the fastest lap in the same car during practice. That was a frankly ridiculous speed that they achieved in that car, which is shown by the fact that Chaz Moster in second, good job to him, was nearly 3 tenths down. So he scored a 108.12. Oh, excuse me. And then from there, it's honestly pretty spread out, the results. James Courtney in third with a 108.12 as well. Extremely close between him and Chaz. David Reynolds next with a 108.2, followed by Scott Pive, a 108.3. Andre Heimgartner with one at 8.3 as well. Di Pasquale with a one at 8.3. The first of the rookies. Good job for him. He was very strong this weekend, actually. I was impressed. Erebus clearly have a good car for enduro. Has probably learnt a thing or two from last year. David Reynolds being, of course, the defending Bathurst champion. Nick Percat in 8th for 108.39. James Golding for 108.39 as well, which, looking at these times, my gosh, Nick Percat got a 108.3996 and James Golding got a 108.3998, which is incredibly close. Shane in 10th for 108.4181. He was a whole 5 tenths down on Jamie Whincup. He was complaining a lot about strange vibrations in the car. As far as I know, there wasn't any actual problem. Maybe there was, and they resolved it over the weekend before the race. But there was no mention of this after qualifying. And his time seemed to improve as well. After that, we've got Cameron Waters in 11th, Fabian Coulthard in 12th, Craig Lowndes in 13th, and Scott McLaughlin in 14th. No speed from the DJR cars, even compared to the Tickford cars. They're both running the same Ford Falcon. I think they're running different engines, but I'm not sure. I think the Tickford engines might be developed in-house, and the DJR engines are developed in-house as well, with Milwaukee Racing being a customer team for Tickford. And I think Todd Hazelwood was a customer team for DJR, but now is running a Holden. So I think that's how it works. I'm not sure. Could be wrong. Could be completely wrong. But it would explain the difference in power that Chaz Mostert can achieve compared to Scott McLaughlin. Because as we all know, Scott McLaughlin has been great in qualifying all year, except for like the last 2 races. And even in this one, he was outperformed by Fabian, which is really rare. It almost never happens. Yeah, they had all sorts of problems. I know that they ended up running just to get the same power, because Sandown's such a fast track. It's all long straights. I know that they were losing quite a bit of speed through the straights compared to the Commodores, and to compensate, they just took a lot out of the rear wing, so they were losing... they were trading grip for speed down the straights, which is something that works at Sandown, but I'm not sure what they're going to do at Bathurst. If they can't get speed up the front straight and down Conrod straight, then I'm not sure what they're going to do. You can't take out that much wing at a Bathurst. You need the grip going over the top of the mountain. So Bathurst will be an interesting prospect, but they did end up taking a lot out of the wing, which resulted in seeing the puffs of tyre smoke coming out of the back of Scotty's car as he flew over the chicane leading up to turn 7, I believe. The tight left-hander coming off the back straight. So if you're wondering why they were so far down in qualifying and not so bad in the race, that's why. It's because they took out wing after qualifying, after seeing how badly they performed compared to everybody else, because they were a whole 6 tenths down on Whincup's time. And if you treat Whincup's time as an anomaly, they were 4 tenths down on Chaz Mostert's time, who was in second. So, not great. Bit worried for them and their championship hopes. We'll discuss that later, though. Winterbottom in 15th, Rick Kelly in 16th. The Nissans not really having any pace during qualifying, especially Rick Kelly. Heimgartner did really well, actually, across the weekend. But he seemed to be the outlier. Everybody else seemed to be pretty poor. The Nissans have sort of lacked power, I think. They have been doing quite poorly on power tracks, which, luckily for them, aren't really very common in supercars, but Sandown is definitely the poweriest of the power tracks, that's for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how they do at Bathurst, which, as we all know, is a real 50-50 when it comes to power and cornering. Tim Slade in 17th. Interesting to see him so far down compared to Nick Percat. Of course, they are teammates. It's not like him to see him so far back, but there you go. Caruso in 18th, Garth Tender in 19th, Will Davison in 20th, Lee Holdsworth in 21st, Jack LeBrock in 22nd, Tim Blanchard in 23rd, Simona in 24th, Todd Hazelwood in 25th, and Richie Stanaway in 26th. 1.4 seconds off the pace. I don't know what happened to Richie. Looking at the timing, he's 3 tenths down on Todd Hazelwood. So, Todd Hazelwood in 25th and Richie Stanaway in 26th. Being 3 tenths down on the next place person is pretty unusual. So it suggests that something was wrong with his car. If there was, no one reported it. We know Stanaway is fast around here, though, because, of course, he won last year with Cameron Waters. So, anyway, that's how they started the first race for the grid. So how do they finish the first race for the grid? As I said before, it started hailing during this race, and the results were, of course, highly random. Everyone ended up all over the place because some people chose to pit, some people went in, some people stayed out during the rain. Those who stayed out were the ones that benefited, but it could have gone either way. In the end, Aaron Russell, who is the co-driver for Heimgartner, ended up in first place. As they kept saying over the weekend, the young rookie from Newcastle, who's a whole 28, so he's not that young, but, he finished in first. They would have been very happy about that. Luke Jordan, for David Reynolds, finished in second, followed by Prema in third. D'Alberto, who was Fabian's driver, in fourth. Macaulay Jones did really well to finish in fifth. Super impressive driving Percat's car. He did... I don't even know if it was his mistake. He got drilled into the back of... Who was it? Who was leading the race at that point? I'm not sure. I want to say it was James Moffat. But I'm not sure. Let me just quickly see if I can find that. Because there was an incident where it looked like Macaulay Jones, just for no reason, just drilled into the back of the car in first and sort of took them both out. Turns out it wasn't the case. He was just... he was pushed into it by the cars behind him. There was a bit of a chain going on. And gosh, I don't even have any words. Well, I can't find it, so I'm going to just not talk about that. I'm going to pretend it didn't happen. Whatever the case, the reason why Macaulay Jones didn't finish in first, because he nearly did, was because he ran to the back of the person who was in first, which might have been Ash Walsh. I'm not sure. I don't remember. Anyway, he got pushed. There was a bit of a train of 4 cars going on, and they all sort of pushed into each other, coming around turn 4, which pushed Macaulay Jones into the back of the first place driver and then into the wall. Macaulay got out, lucky for him, but he would have inherited first. But the person who did inherit first was Aaron Russell, so good for him. Alex Davison, driving for Will Davison, finished in 6th. Ash Walsh in 7th, driving for Tim Slade. He made a ton of positions, again, up 10 spots. Everybody up the front made up at least 1 spot because they chose to stay out while everybody else went in. Dean Canto driving for Winterbottom in 8th. Dale Wood driving for Tim Blanchard in 9th, the last of the cars to not pit to stay out on slick. So only 9 cars out of 26 chose to stay out. And it worked out really well for them. But everybody else, including number 10, James Moffat driving for Chaz Mostert. Paul Dumbrell, after pitting and coming out in 14th or 15th, ended up finishing 11th, driving for Jamie Whincup. Will Brown, driving for Di Pasquale, finished in 12th. Stephen Richards, driving for Craig Lowndes, finished in 13th and didn't move an inch from where he qualified. Jack Perkins, driving for James Courtney, finished in 14th. David Russell, driving for Cameron Waters, finished in 15th. Earl Bamber, making up, I think, 3 spots after his pit stop, after his double stack, finished in 16th for Shane. Dean Fiore driving for Michael Caruso, finished in 17th. Steve Owen driving for Richie Tanaway, finished in 18th, making up 8 spots. Good job for him. Chris Piffer driving for Garth Tander, not moving an inch and finishing in 19th. Gary Jacobson, never sure how to say his name, finished in 20th for Rick Kelly. Jonathan Webb moving up 1 spot to finish in 21st for Jack LeBrock. Warren Luff finishing in 22nd for Scott Pye. Richard Muscat finishing in 23rd for James Golding. And not classified, Alex Rouleau for Simona. Bryce Forward for Todd Hazelwood. And Jason Bright for Lee Holdsworth. Jason Bright having a bit of a very high-speed crash coming off the last corner. And bringing out a safety car. Alex Rouleau, I think, beached it, if I remember correctly, off turn 4. And I don't remember what happened to Bryce Forward. I honestly don't remember. That'll teach me not to take notes. So, those are the results of Race for the Grid number 1. But, as we all know, Race for the Grid number 2 is where the magic is really going on. And the results for that were David Reynolds in first, Jamie Whincup in second, making up 9 spots, which is frankly amazing in a 20-lap race. Scott McLaughlin and Fabian Coulthard not moving at all, finishing in 3rd and 4th. Mark Winterbottom making up 3 spots to finish in 5th. Good job for him. Heimgartner finishing in 6th. I think that's the exact spot that he qualified in, so maybe that's fair. Mostert making up 3 spots to finish in 7th. Slade finishing in 8th. Di Pasquale finishing in 9th, the first of the rookies. Good job for him. He had some impressive form all weekend, to be honest. Craig Lowndes finishing in 10th, making up 3 spots. Van Gisbergen finishing in 11th, making up 5 spots. Will Davison finishing in 12th. Cameron Waters finishing in 13th. Tim Blanchard in 14th. Good job for him to maintain. I mean, he dropped 5 positions, but good job for him to start a race, start Sandown in 14th. No mean feat for a one-car team that's been a bit of a backmarker all year. Garth Tander in 15th, Rick Kelly in 16th, Stanaway in 17th, Caruso in 18th, Scott Pye in 19th, Jack LeBrock in 20th, Lee Holdsworth in 21st, Simona in 22nd, Todd Hazelwood in 23rd, Golding in 24th, Nick Percat in 25th, down 20 spots, and I don't know why. I don't remember seeing anything happening to Percat. It could be wrong, though. I could just be completely dumb. It wouldn't surprise me. And not classified, James Courtney, after being out let's get the words out after 2 laps, bringing out the only safety car of Race for the Grid. Not as chaotic as the first race, but still exciting. Definitely sets up a precedent that Jamie Whincup would dominate this weekend. Still a bit in shock that he made up 9 positions in 20 laps. That's almost a position every 2 laps, which is, frankly, that's amazing. It really is, especially since he's not coming from last and fighting his way through up slower cars. He started in 10th, 11th. He started in 11th. And he made his way up through a bunch of big names to get there. He took advantage of some chaos in front of him. Percat dropped down a few spots. Heimgartner spun out, and that's why he dropped down 5 spots. Will Davison dropped a lot of spots as well. Tim Blanchard, again, dropped a few spots. So he took advantage of some mistakes, for sure, but he did really well to get where he was. Like, that was amazing. Shane as well did pretty good. Not anywhere near as good as Jamie. Again, I was really impressed with Reynolds and Di Pasquale. Erebus seem to have a good package for endurance. They seem to have sort of worked that out. So that'll be good coming into Bathurst. The people I am worried about, though, were Scott McLaughlin and Fabian Coulthard, who, even though they finished in 3rd and 4th, did just not have the speed to challenge Jamie Whincup at all, which is concerning considering that's their championship rival team, who just flew by them. We'll see how that turned out when we move on into the race results. After 161 laps, the finishing order was as such. Jamie Whincup and Paul Dumbrell in first, Shane Van Gisbergen and Earl Bamber in second, and Craig Lowndes and Stephen Richards in third, with a 888-1-2-3 for the first time in the history of endurance races in the ATCC or the Supercars. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of lame. I was also disappointed that Craig let Shane through. I don't know what happened to Craig. He was 4.5 seconds in front of Shane, and then in 2 laps, Shane had gotten past him. I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought Shane was going to finish in third. And when they brought up the lap-to-lap deltas between the two cars, Craig was losing 0.2 a lap, and then suddenly he lost 1.2 seconds and then 1.5 seconds, and I don't know why. There was no replay. It didn't seem like Craig made a mistake. Maybe he made a mistake and they didn't think it was good enough to show. Something happened, and I really, really hope they didn't tell Craig to slow down just so Shane could get past him. I really hope that's not what happened. Because it's Craig's last year as a full-time driver. Like, yeah, the championship's important, but Shane was already ahead of Scott. And looking at your car, I would be pretty confident that you are going to finish ahead of DJR, and that's my prediction for the championship. Really, I think I can call it now that Triple Eight will take out constructor, and they will also take out driver. I don't think Jamie will beat Shane, but it's not impossible. My money is on Shane to win at this stage, because Triple Eight have the best overall package now. DJR did have the best package at the start of the year for the first half of the year. Red Bull have that now, easily the best package. DJR have no power, none down the straights. I don't know what is wrong with their engine, but they are super underpowered. It's like watching a backmarker team when it comes to straights, and the fact they have to take out so much of their wing really worries me for Bathurst. As we all know, Bathurst is a real 50-50. There's huge straights down Conrod and up Mountain Straight. Big, long straights. And then the top of the mountain is a hugely tight, flowing section, very technical, where you need that aero grip. You need it. You can't go without it. You have to have... You can't run a skinny wing around the top of the mountain. It's going to end in disaster. So what's going to happen is they're going to have to put in enough wing to combat going around the mountain. And yeah, Scott can run with a low amount of wing. He's good at that. But he can't run with zero wing like he is at Sandown. It'll be ridiculous. He'll crash up the top of the mountain, guaranteed. So they'll have to put in more wing. Maybe not that much more, but probably less than what everybody else will be running still. But they'll have to put in more wing, which means that when it comes to the long straights, they're going to be underpowered. And as we know, you can be the slowest car in the world around the top of the mountain and people can't get around you. But as long as you're fast down the straights, no one can do anything about it. If he's got the opposite problem, if he's fast around the top and slow through the straights, or even if he's just normal up the top and slow down the straights, he is going to get swamped at Bathurst. Okay? And it's just... Triple Eight are going to fly past. All three of those cars will destroy it. Erebus will fly past. We even saw it at Sandown. Towards the end of the race, David was just all over the back of Scott. All over him. The only reason he couldn't get past is because Scott was getting better run out of the turns. And that is pretty much it. He had better drive out of the turns, which sort of suggests that maybe Davey was understeering a little bit. Either that or Scott just had better tyres on his car. Or it's just their driving style. But that's the only thing that's going to save him at Bathurst. If he needs good drive out of the corners, and to get the best amount of drive out of a corner, you need grip. And to get grip, you either need good tyre life, or you need, which is mechanical grip, or you need good aero. And if they don't have good aero, they've only got mechanical grip, which means they're going to have to either pit more or suffer the consequences. It really does worry me. I don't know off the top of my head how many races are left. I think it's Bathurst, Gold Coast, New Zealand, Newcastle, I think. I am not confident that Scott can win this championship anymore. I think we're going to watch from now on. We're going to see that lead that he had, that huge lead, just evaporate. And now Shane's all he's got to do is finish ahead of Scott. That's all he's got to do. He knows that. He knows that they're weak. Shane's a smart driver. He knows that all he needs to do is finish ahead of Scott every time. And I think he's got this, and I think Scott knows that as well. There's been a few articles that have come out recently in the last few days that really do suggest that the team is worried. And when the team starts to lose faith, when the driver starts to lose faith, that's when things go south. I'm putting my money on it now. Shane will win the championship. Red Bull will take constructors. That's my bet. I also think that Jamie and Craig will finish ahead of Scott in the championship points. That's a big, especially Craig, that's a big one, but that's just what I'm putting out there. That's my prediction for the rest of the year. As for the Sandown results, though, I get really off track. Scott finished in 4th in the end. He did pretty well. He's a really good driver. Even with a not so great car, he can fight his way through there and manage to stay near the top. It also helps that they have really good strategists in that team. They know what they're doing. David Reynolds and Luke Yilden in 5th. Scott Pye and Warren Luff in 6th with a great recovery. Good job, really. He fought his way up really far to stay there. It really did pay off for some of these teams that are up here because they pitted early. I didn't expect it to pay off. In an endurance race, pitting early and getting an undercut really isn't that advantageous, but it really worked out for him. Scott Pye and Rick Kelly were both beneficiaries. Garth Tander as well. They all just pitted early, like right at the start. Not super early, but before everybody else. They got clean air and they just drove for a while. And this is probably owing to the fact that Sandown's a very low grip track. Not low grip, but low tire wear track. So they were able to just keep going, really. It ended up really well for them. So, good on them. Scott Pye and Warren Luff did a great job. Fabian Coulthard and Tony D'Alberto in 7th. Rick Kelly and Gary Jacobson in 8th. I'm sorry if your last name is Jacobson/Jacobson. Please tell me how to pronounce it. I don't know. I'd like to know. 9th was Garth Tander and Chris Piffer with a great recovery from where they were, which I think was 19th. Chaz Mostert and James Moffat in 10th. The first of the Tickford cars, it was good to see them with good one-lap pace, and they did fade during the race. I'll talk more about the Fords in the news, but some things are clearly not right with the Fords, because all of them are suffering compared to the Holdens. The Holdens are clearly the better car at the moment. Will Davison and Alex Davison in 11th. I wish more people would acknowledge how good Will Davison does in that car, considering that it's a Tickford supplied car, and he often outperforms the Tickford cars. I wish people would acknowledge that he does a really good job. I'm sad that he's not in a top team anymore. I think he had a lot more potential, and he just got unlucky with the teams that he chose to sign on to, choosing to sign on to the HSV dealer team and then onto the Full Performance team as they were fading. Just ended up not being a good idea, but there you go. Anton Di Pasquale and Will Brown in 12th. The first of the rookies. Great race from them. I was really impressed with them, especially Will Brown. He did a great job. He was able to keep it up there. With everybody, with the most experienced, well-versed drivers in Supercars history almost against Jamie Whincup and Craig Lowndes. He was able to fight his way out up there, they ended up finishing in 12th, which is down a few spots from where they started. But considering they're both completely rookies, finishing in 12th is an excellent result. Cameron Waters and David Russell in 13th. Andre Heimgartner and Aaron Russell in 14th. Bit of a shame for Heimgartner and Russell, actually. They did really well. They just got a bit unlucky. They got spun out very early, and had to recover from 20th to 14th, which they did well to do. It was just a shame. I had high hopes for them, but Tim Slade and Ash Walsh in 15th, James Courtney and Jack Perkins in 16th. They looked like they were on a charge at one point, and I don't know what happened. Their tyre life just seemed to fade, and they just dropped dramatically. They were right up there with Scott Pye. I think they were right behind him at one point, or even ahead of him. And it just, towards the end of the race, their tyre life just faded, and they just went back to 16th. It was kind of a shame. I was looking forward to seeing them charge through the field. A James Courtney charge is always exciting. 17th was Mark Winterbottom and Dean Cantor. 18th was James Golding and Richard Muscat. 19th, Tim Blanchard and Dale Wood. He dropped a few spots. I think he started in 14th. Still a good result from Tim. I think it's one of his better results this year, so good job for him. Richie Stanaway and Steve Owen in 20th. Glad to see them recover a little bit from where they started. Actually, I think he might have dropped. Never mind. Disregard that. Todd Hazelwood and Bryce Forward. This time, Todd came out unscathed from Sandown. Good job in 21st. Jack LeBrock and Jonathan Webb in 22nd, finishing 5 laps down after they had to garage with... not sure what it was. Some kind of mechanical issue. Lee Holdsworth and Jason Bright in 23rd after Bright managed to overcook it coming into turn 7. The left-hander coming off the back straight and beached it in the sand. They finished 15 laps down. Nick Percat and Macaulay Jones in 24th after Macaulay Jones had all those issues, mechanical issues, so many problems with that car. Good to see them classified though and get some points. And Michael Caruso and Dean Fiore after colliding with... I don't remember who it was. Colliding with another car and then colliding into the wall and breaking a... Must have been a steering arm or something. That wheel was incredibly wobbly. Only completed 134 laps of 161, but still classified and got 60 points. And only not classified car, Simona and Alex Rouleau. Finishing 129 laps. So, how is the championship looking now that Shane finished 2 spots ahead of Scott? Well, you ask these questions and I will answer. Shane Van Gisbergen is first and retains his lead with 3,054 points, with Scott McLaughlin 55 points behind. He had a 19 points deficit to Shane. It's now 55 points, and I think that this number is only going to get bigger unless Shane really muffs it up at Bathurst, which he has done before. Let's be fair, last year he had an awful race. So, barring Shane's aggressive nature, I think this number will only get bigger. And someone else that is proving themselves to be a competitor still, which I had written off probably a bit too early, Jamie Whincup, 338 points down. This means Shane's only one bad weekend away from being third in the championship, basically. So there's still some fighting to go. I would like to see someone else apart from Jamie win the championship. I think he's had a few. He's had 7 now. I think someone else can win. I would really like to see Scotty win. He deserved it last year. He just made a few rookie mistakes at Newcastle that cost him. I say a few. He got 3 penalties for it. I've never seen someone get 3 penalties in one race. Yeah, I would like Scott to win. I'd also like Shane to win, just as long as it's not Whincup. Whincup's had 7. He doesn't need any more. Let someone else win, you know. Let someone else have a go. By that rule that I've established, that should mean that Scott should win, because Shane's won one before as well. So, you know, there you go. Let's go with that. I would like Scotty to win. I think he deserves it. He's matured so much as a driver, but I do think that Shane's got this one unless he himself muffs it up. I hope he doesn't, but you never know. Craig Lowndes in 4th with a 567 point deficit. Wouldn't it be great if Craig won a championship in his last year? Wouldn't that be fantastic? I don't think it'll happen. I don't see it happening, especially the way that they tell him, especially since they tell him to get out of the way every time Shane's near him. But wouldn't it be great if he did? It'd just be fantastic. David Reynolds, who doesn't seem like he's going to be able to challenge anymore, it's not insurmountable. 619 points down is basically two round wins. But it's pretty far back. I don't think he'll win, barring he wins Bathurst, and again, all the people in front of him do really badly, which isn't impossible. It's Bathurst. I think last race, Scott retired and Shane finished way back, so it's not impossible. But, unlikely. Now we're moving to the people that I don't think have a ghost of a chance anymore. Fabian Coulthard, 940 points down. Rick Kelly, 956 points down. Chaz Mostert, 1,006 points down. Scott Pye in 9th, 1,148 points down. And Tim Slade in 10th, 1,192 points down. Following the top 10, we've got Nick Percat in 11th, Mark Winterbottom in 12th, Garth Tander in 13th, James Courtney in 14th, Will Davison in 15th, Michael Caruso in 16th, Cameron Waters in 17th, Jack LeBrock in 18th, Andre Heimgartner in 19th, Anton Di Pasquale still behind Jack LeBrock despite a really strong showing, but not by much anymore. Jack is going to have to watch out. James Golding in 21st, Lee Holdsworth in 22nd, Tim Blanchard in 23rd, Richie Stanaway in 24th, Simona in 25th, Todd Hazelwood in 26th. And now, to add to this list, we've got all the co-drivers who competed, which I'm not going to bother reading out. So let's just say that Todd Hazelwood is last in the championship this year at the moment. Now, let's move into the team championships. I think it's pretty safe to say that Red Bull's got this one. They are 657 points ahead of DJR. I think it's pretty safe to say that Red Bull has wrapped that one up in the terms of the constructors. Obviously, it's not done. I just don't think Fabian is a stronger driver as Shane, if you want to go with ones and twos. Jamie's probably the number one, Scott's the number one. So let's say Shane's the number two, and Fabian's the number two, if we want to compare them together. Obviously, I think all these drivers are on equal contracts, but if you want to compare them together, Jamie and I think Scott are more than a match for each other in terms of sheer driver skill. I think Scott might even be a bit better than Jamie these days. But I think Shane completely outclasses Fabian in terms of driver skill. So I think Red Bull have got this one, to be honest. Erebus are in third, a full 2,000 points down, but they are also now tied with Winterbottom and Chaz Mostert. They have the exact same amount of points, amazingly, 3,688. Bradley Jones Racing in 5th. Mobile One Boost Racing, the old HSV dealer team, in 6th, which is a shame to see. They just had a lot of issues with that car. They just can't seem to get it working mechanically, which has been really the issue with the reason why James Courtney is so far down in the championship. Scott Pye's been lucky, which is why he's a bit further. But I would like to see them next year to be up a bit higher, fighting for wins a bit more often. Nissan, Castrol, Rick Kelly and Andre Heimgartner in 7th. Again, another team I'd like to see fighting for wins a bit more often. They got so close this year to developing a strong package, and I'm just so sad to see it go next year. Not next year, the year after. So let's see if they can get a last hurrah next year. I hope so. Gary Rogers in 8th. Lowndes on his own in 9th, who is also still ahead of Michael Caruso and Simona in 10th. Cameron Waters and Rich Stanaway in 11th. Will Davison in 12th on his own. Jack LeBrock in 13th on his own, with now 30 penalty points to his name. We'll get to that. Lee Holdsworth on his own in 14th. Tim Blanchard in 15th. And Todd Hazelwood in 16th. So, after a thrilling Bathurst, what I think wasn't too interesting of a race, to be honest. I know it's endurance and they're all playing it a bit safer. But there was plenty of overtakes, plenty of movement going on. It was a very exciting race, actually, for the first 100 and so laps. Everyone was really close together and just lots of movement was going on around the field. But once the order was settled, that was kind of it. And Jamie never looked like he was going to lose, to be honest. He got out ahead, and I think the first thing that I think in like 10 laps or something, Paul Dumbrell got a 15-second lead or something ridiculous like that. It was crazy. I sort of hope that they're a bit less dominant coming into Bathurst. I'd like to see, some excitement for Bathurst. I don't like it when one person runs away with it. We don't. No one does, So let's hope that we see some excitement for Bathurst. We should see some definitely, or at the very least, we should see. God. All right, let me start again. At the very least, we should see some action between the 888 boys, who just seem to have a good package for the endurance races this year. But Bathurst is a different beast altogether, so we will see how it goes. Let's move into the news. And the first thing up is that 888 are closing in on a 2019 decision for whether or not they will run 3 cars next year. Now, of course, Craig is retiring, and this brings up the question of what's going to happen to his car, because they set him aside when Shane joined the team and made it a 3-car team, with his being a sort of separate entry. He is, of course, retiring, so the question comes up: will they keep in Lowndes' entry? God, that's a hard name. That's a hard thing to say. They will keep Craig's entry. There we go. Will they keep Craig's entry and bring in a new driver, or will they drop it completely and become a 2-car outfit? Basically, the answer is we don't know. No one's decided yet. Roland Dane is saying that basically there's no decision come across. So, when asked, Roland Dane said this: I still haven't made a definitive decision on whether we are going to do 2 or 3. I think we've proven that we can run 3 cars, and there's no shortage of people who would like us to run a 3rd car. But I have to make the decision that's best for the business. 888 Race Engineering is a business. It's not a personal plaything. It's a business. When asked if he is close to reaching a decision, Dane added, "We are. I would hope to within this month. I've always said within September. We have to be making those calls. We won't run 4 cars. I never say never, but for next year it will be 2 or 3. So it looks like not a 4th car, so not going down the Tickford Road, which I think is probably a smart move, probably stretching yourself a bit too thin. I would like them to keep their 3rd car, if only because it lets a driver be promoted up through the field to a strong team, so we can see some more talent racing at the pointy end. That's what I like to see. And according to Roland Dane, well, not Roland Dane, but according to this article from Supercars.com, Simona was actually linked with that seat. I don't know how I feel about that. I like Simona as a driver. I think she's a very good... I think she's good for... God, I don't even know how to say this without making some people upset. I think Simona is good. I think she deserves to be on the grid. But I also think a lot of her appeal for teams comes from the fact that I believe she draws a lot of money. I think the reason why the Nissan squad has been able to stay afloat, one of the reasons it's been able to run 4 cars, is I think Simona probably pays for that seat herself. Not that she pays out of her own pocket, but the fact that she's the only woman driver in supercars, or even one of the only women drivers on the planet, brings a lot of money with it. It brings a lot of sponsorships, it brings a lot of PR, it brings a lot of attention to supercars as a sport. They will be desperate to hold on to Simona in a seat. Period. Supercars, the company. And anyone that brings Simona up to a top team like that is going to receive a huge amount of attention. I wouldn't say that Red Bull need extra funding, though, which is the part that I'm unsure about. I also wouldn't say that Simona has really proven herself as a really good driver in supercars either. I'm not saying she's a bad driver by any stretch. I think that if she could, given the opportunity to really stretch her legs at the front of the field, she probably could. And she's been sort of stuck down the back in an average-ish car, fighting amongst average-ish drivers, which always makes racing hard. We've seen it happen to even the best of drivers when they get stuck down the back of the grid. But But the counter argument to that is that Rick Kelly and Michael Caruso are able to do much more than she has with what is theoretically the same car. Even Andre Heimgartner has been more impressive this year than Simona. Which begs the question, why was she linked with that seat? If it's not money, if it's not apparent driver skill, what is the reason for bringing Simona up? And the main reason I can think of is money. That's the main reason. Not to say she's a bad driver, but that is the main reason I can think of it. I think there are much stronger drivers on the field that deserve to be promoted to a top seat like that. Which, speaking of, who deserves to be promoted to a top seat should they keep 3 cars? Now, this is the part where we discuss things and everyone gets mad at me for suggesting the wrong driver. But my pick is probably, if they have to pick... Okay, let me rephrase my thoughts. What I would like to see is young drivers in this third car. So you've got your 2 experienced drivers in the main team, so to speak, and your third car, your separate car, is a young driver. Sort of a semi-Red Bull young drivers program going on. I would love to see rookie drivers or drivers in their first or second or third year being promoted into this seat. With that in mind, I would like to see either Richie Stanaway or Jack LeBrock in that seat. I think that would be pretty great. I think Richie even has the elements that made Shane a great driver. He's highly aggressive in his overtakes and in his driving style. I think he's a bit more calmer than Shane was when he first started racing. But I think he shows the exact same talent that Shane showed when he was introduced to V8 Supercars. I think he's a really good talent. As do I with Jack LeBrock. I think Jack LeBrock is an excellent talent as well. And considering that Tekno share a bay with the Autobahn Craig Lowndes Racing, they probably have some data on him as well. I would love to see one of these 2 drivers in that seat. I think that would be 2 really solid choices. I think they would fight really hard for it, given the chance as well. Whether or not Richie Stanaway is linked to the Tickford car, like he might be locked down there for a while. Who knows? He's been racing for them for a little bit, so maybe he can't move. But in that case, I'd love to see Jack LeBrock move, because Tekno is a small outfit. All I'd have to do is say, hey, we'll give you some money, and Tekno probably can't say no. We all know they're a bit strapped for cash these days. So, I would love to see that. That would be amazing. Jack LeBrock or Richie Stanaway in that car, I think, would make for some interesting battles. But it looks like, from the way they're talking about it, that they're going to move back to a 2-car team, which means that there'll be a car and a team bay up for grabs for someone to buy into. So we could see a new team next year, or one of the 1-car teams expanding into a 2-car team. With the people who have declared an interest in purchasing that car include the Kostecki Brothers Racing Team, which is the team that is currently... which is one of the leading teams in the Dunlop Super 2 series, which is a 3-car outfit. So they would have a 1-car team, I believe. Or it means they can enter a whole new team with as many cars as they want. I kind of hope this happens as well, because it would increase the field from 26 cars to 28 if they entered 3 cars. You take away Craig's car and then enter 3 more cars. So 26 to 28, which more cars is always better. The closer we get to the number of yesteryear where we had 32, 35 cars, I think the better. It makes for way more interesting races if you've got more cars going around the track. And it's just something I'd love to see. So either way, it's a bit of a win-win. But I would like to see Jack LeBrock or Richie Stanaway in that Autobahn car. I think it would make for some incredible racing events and results. Moving on to the next piece of news. If you're wondering why Jack LeBrock has a 30 championship point penalty, it's because he got one at Sandown. They were fined $3,000 and 30 team championship points after they were found to work on the Commodore without incompressible jacks, which is illegal. Excuse me. They fixed the car after lap 21. after having a broken rear track rod, and they just didn't put in any incompressible jacks, which got them a fine. Not a huge deal. Sucks for them, but you got to follow the rules. That's the way things go. I was hoping to see Jack LeBrock do have a stronger showing than he did. This being his first full-time enduro, but we'll see. In other news, we've got so this is a bigger one. DJR has been fined $30,000 for an incident that happened at the Tailem Bend. You might be asking, what happened at the Bend? Well, apparently, DJR changed McLaughlin's gearbox at the Bend for qualifying. I think, following the Saturday. Okay, so on Saturday they had the regular gearbox. On Sunday, before qualifying, they fitted a replacement gearbox with a 1.07 drop gear ratio instead of the mandated 1.00. Why did they do that? Well, apparently the 1.07 drop gear ratio gearbox was intended for testing for the new Ford Mustang coming in next year. So they mixed up the gearboxes, put the wrong one in the actual car, and then Supercars officials found out, and instead of docking their championship points, they gave them a $30,000 fine, which I'm on two opinions about. On one hand, it's kind of good that they're not docking them points, because it means that... Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm kind of glad they're not docking them points, because it was Scott's car that had the replaced gearbox, not Fabian's. And it would have meant that we would have not as close a championship fight, potentially. On the other hand, it also sets the precedent that doing things that could affect the result in the race doesn't deduct you points, it just gets you a money fine, which could incentivize more richer teams like DJR and Red Bull to maybe take the risk of being found out for having illegal parts if they can only worry about getting a monetary fine instead of championship point deduction. $30,000 though is a lot of money, so maybe it's not, it's nothing to be sneezed at, so I doubt someone would want to incur that penalty for no reason. But that's sort of where I stand on it. Yeah, it's an insignificant addition. The reason why they didn't penalise him points is apparently because it probably wouldn't have affected his placement in the race anyway, which is true. It probably wouldn't have affected anything. But the traditional penalty, if they had found out after qualifying that he had the wrong part, is for him to start at the back of the race. He started that race in 10th. So you can see how they were probably pretty lenient on him to give a $30,000 fine. And the reason why they did that is because they don't want to interfere with the championship results. Yeah, it's a really hard decision to call. I do see where they're going with it. I'm not sure if it was the right call. Time will tell, though. Maybe it would have been better to dock championship team points instead of driver points. But again, that's not fair to Fabian or the rest of his garage because they didn't do anything wrong. So what do you do? Moving on from there, though. Actually, that's pretty much all of the news that we've got. So, the next race, the Bathurst 1000. So I just quickly want to do some race predictions. Who do I think will win the Bathurst 1000? And honestly, my money's on Jamie Whincup again. He looked really strong at Sandown. Really strong. I think him and Umbrella are a really good combination for enduros. They know what they're doing. And that car, if it continues the pace that it had in Sandown, will just be unstoppable. That'll be the one to beat. As for the top three, I think Jamie, Craig, David. That's my top three. And I reckon Shane will finish outside the top 10 somehow, and Scotty will finish in 5th or 6th. That's my prediction. Shane has had a bit of a rough run around Bathurst. He's never really had a good Bathurst finish. Usually owing to his own impatience. Last year he did it, I think he went off the track 4 or 5 times during Bathurst last year. It was absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous. Which is interesting though, because he's done a 12-hour race fine plenty of times and he doesn't crash in that. So I don't know what it is. It's one of the reasons why I like Shane so much though. He's a very aggressive driver. He's very fun to watch. And this is just what comes with the territory. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But my prediction is Jamie Whincup for first, Craig Lowndes for second, and David Reynolds for third. But I would like to see Craig win the race. That would be a very fairy tale ending for his career. But, you know, I think my money's on Jamie. So we'll see. We're approaching the end of the season, though. The championship battle is heating up. Tell me who you think will win the championship, and tell me who you think will win the Bathurst 1000. I'm excited. Let's quickly just see when is the Bathurst 1000 on. It's on the 7th of October, which is quite a while from now. 3 weeks from now. Yes, 3 weeks from now is the Bathurst 1000. Join me then. Well, not then, but join me after the Bathurst 1000 for the discussion on how things went. As always, I have been your host, Kendall, and it is time for me to say goodbye. See you next time for the Bathurst 1000, the biggest race of the year. See you then.